and welcome to this India Today special. 3 years of the Narendra Modi government have been completed, and we are here at India Today to give you a report card of the Prime Minister. On this round table, I'm joined by India Today editors. I'm joined by Padmaja Joshi of India Today Television, Devina Gupta of India Today Television, Rajiv Dubey of Business Today, Javed Ansari, India Today TV, Raj Chengappa, Group Editorial Director at India Today, who's just brought out an issue assessing the Modi government, calling it Modi Bharat, and Rahul Kawal, our managing editor. Okay, it's time then to look at what the Modi government has achieved in terms of the Prime Minister's own image.
मैं विनम्रता से कहूँगा हम लोग काम करते हैं और जनता को मैं इतना ही कह सकता हूँ हमारे अच्छे दिन आने की शुरुआत हो गई है.
This country has to be made a superpower. This country should be in the Committee of Nations right at the top. And we still continue to believe that the journey is long.
The party that you're tom-tomming today landed up with less than 2 seats almost 25-30 years ago. Now, kudos to them that they've risen to such a great crescendo, and I think we must recognize that as a challenge.
These promises that the Prime Minister made to facilitate the economic growth of individuals of our country and of the nation as a whole is something that I hold dear to my heart.
नरेंद्र मोदी जी ने सार्वजनिक जीवन की सुचिता को ऊपर उठाने के लिए, मैं इरिस्पेक्टिव ऑफ भारतीय जनता पार्टी कहता हूं, ऊपर उठाने के लिए बहुत काम किया है.
Okay, so 3 years of the Modi government, the first area we're looking at is the Prime Minister's image. The strengths as we see it, or I see it, are strong 24/7 leadership, astute communication and marketing skills, and success that the Prime Minister has had with programs like Swachch Bharat and Dhan Yojana, where he has invested his own political capital. His weaknesses: highly centralized leadership, a lack of social cohesion, questions over sabka saath, and a lag between promise and performance. Let's take that. Do you agree with my strengths and weaknesses, Raj Chengappa, or do you believe I'm being excessively deferential or excessively critical?
Well, overall, he's performed well, and that's clear. To the qualities that you've talked about in terms of strong and decisive leadership, I thought he's brought clarity to governance in 3 or 4 key areas. One is empowering the people, and that you can see in his entire proper approach towards it. The second is his focus on infrastructure and development, and he has actually allocated a whole lot, whether it's on energy, power, railways. He's spent a lot, housing, road construction. I mean, these are big areas that he's focused on. I think the other area that he's made a big difference is that focusing on states as the fulcrum of development, which is because he was Chief Minister of Gujarat for so many years, he's brought that philosophy in. And I think finally, if you look at it, he's focused a lot on minimizing corruption, cleaning things up. Demonetization was a major move on this, and trying to improve delivery, particularly of doles and everything else that's there. So I think these are 4 big areas, and he's performed well on that.
Let's settle this. Has corruption actually got minimized? Is it simply that high-level scams have not been uncovered, and therefore we are saying that the Prime Minister's acted on corruption? Has bureaucratic corruption in this country lessened? Has petty corruption lessened?
Well, it's less rampant now than it was ever. You have to give him credit. No, it's been 3 years. Around this time, Manmohan Singh's second government was mired in corruption. There are no corruption charges against anybody in the central government, so you have to give him credit there. But as far as the other schemes are concerned, the jury is still out. I'm not so sure if demonetization is an economic success. It's a political success, no doubt. I'd like to, as from the Prime Minister's point, I would have expected the Prime Minister to be allowed to bring to bear the same kind of energy and dynamism on social issues. He's conspicuous by his silence on them. He once spoke against cow vigilantes. I'm told that he was rapped on the knuckles by the RSS chief, and since then there's been a deafening silence.
Let's just settle this corruption argument in a moment, because many believe it's come out of fear, and I'm linking it to the weakness which many believe is autocratic leadership. That out of sheer fear, no one wants to talk about corruption, or no one perhaps hopefully wants to indulge in corruption, which is a good thing. Others believe that what is seen as decisive leadership is also authoritarian leadership. Is he decisive or is he authoritarian?
Rajdeep, to the list of his plus points that you gave, there is one thing, and which is also used as evidence by people who support Narendra Modi, is nothing succeeds like success. And they keep talking about how every step that he has taken has been validated by repeated elections, consecutive elections, where he and his party have succeeded. So even on demonetization, the elections that followed soon after, the kind of results that the BJP got, they say that even though the jury may be out on the overall results of demonetization, but on the ground, people have accepted it despite all the difficulties.
Where does this charisma stem from? Is he seen as a risk taker? Demonetization, was it an example of a prime minister willing to take risks, and he's seen as a strong communicative prime minister, particularly in contrast with his predecessor who was silent most of the time?
Rajdeep, 3 years into his term, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has virtually no anti-incumbency pulling him down. If at all, his level of popularity in 2017 is more than the level of popularity he had in 2014, which in any case was a huge Modi tsunami. To remain popular 3 years in is a huge testimony to the effort he's made. He hasn't taken a single day off in the last 3 years that he's been working. Day in, day out, night in, night out. Speak to officials who attend meetings with him. His attention to details, meetings that go on for several hours. Officials who are decades younger than him tell us that they get tired, they want to take a break, and the man is so focused. He's pulling up people. You know, people look only at what's appearing in the media. There's so many projects where we know the Prime Minister is not satisfied with the progress that's being made. The Navami Gange is one example. The kind of pasting he gave his officials in the review meeting on why the project wasn't moving. So here's a man who's driven by a higher sense of purpose. Whether anybody accepts it or not, Prime Minister Modi in his head believes this is destiny making him work so hard.
How much of this is packaging? Let's be fair to Manmohan Singh. Manmohan Singh also used to work very hard. It's just that we never saw Manmohan Singh. We were never told stories about how hard he's working. I'm just wondering whether it's the packaging also.
But there is a Manmohan Singh story. Sanjay Baru told us this story. They'd gone to Goa for an inauguration.
Yes.
It was a Saturday evening. Sanjay Baru suggested to the Prime Minister, why don't we spend Sunday here? Let's go to the beach. Dr. Singh said, beach jaake kya hoga? Let's get back and work. So Prime Minister Manmohan Singh...
So that's what I'm just wondering whether I'm just wondering whether the packaging of Mr. Modi has been just as good as perhaps, the fact that he's a karma yogi. I don't think anyone doubts that this is a Prime Minister who works enormously hard.
Well, Rajdeep, I want to come in this point because demonetization, as you said, has been a risk-taking factor, and packaging 100%, of course, because if you look at the black money crackdown promise that the Prime Minister had, you just had about, say, 70,000 odd crore that's been raked in after demonetization in terms of black money, though the figures are not out, but that's just a drop in the ocean. So if you look at the pre-poll promises of 15 lakh rupees in every Indian's account from black money, that hasn't been fulfilled. But look at the mandate that he's got in state polls. I think that packaging has really worked with post-team.
Rajiv, you've been very silent.
I'll go with one thumbs up and one thumbs down on the image. I think he's been a phenomenal salesperson for the country around the world. And I think the FDI that has been coming into the country, about 150 billion of that in the past 3 years, some credit of that must go to Mr. Modi. But I think if you look at another geostrategic, economic issue of Belt and Road, I think we've been caught napping. So there's a thumbs down there and there was a thumbs up on FDI.
But just the image. I come back to the image of the man. As you said, he's larger than life. There is a sense that he's winning election after election in his name, and no Prime Minister perhaps has done that since Indira Gandhi in the 1970s. I'm just wondering whether people are simply mesmerized, hypnotized at the moment by what Narendra Modi is seen to represent. A strong, powerful leader. India has been looking for that powerful leader, and Mr. Modi likes to give the impression that he's a muscular leader.
Is it just about packaging? Look, for example, what happened between ministers during Manmohan Singh's regime when they had a difference of opinion. They'd constantly be carping, leaking to the media against each other, holding up decisions. Here, you speak to ministers who tell you that they have a difference of opinion with a colleague, but they're so petrified of the Prime Minister that they sit with each other and say, let's find some solution. So often, whether it's a Gadkari and a Piyush Goyal or anybody else, they say, before this meeting ends, let's find a solution.
You have somebody in authority. He heads a single party government. It's a lot more difficult when you're heading a multi-party government. A coalition government is by its very nature difficult to manage.
The lack of social cohesion. Javed briefly mentioned it. Do you believe that just as he is seen strong in his astute communication and marketing skills, as he is seen in his success of projects like Swachch Bharat and Dhan Yojana, which were incidentally UPA projects, but he's invested his political capital in it, his weakness perhaps is that he needs to speak out on the issue of social harmony more often and more clearly than he can. The message doesn't seem to resonate on the ground.
No, I mean, I think what Mr. Modi has done, and over a period of time, and he's learnt on the job, is to develop a pro-poor image. Both it is very effective, not only administratively, but politically as well, because it then, he transcends caste and communal consideration. But in doing that, he has touched at the core of what is, after all, this is going to be 70 years of independence. We are worried about what? Many of the people still, almost 30 to 40% of our population still defecates in the open. He's addressing that issue. Water is an issue. He's addressing that. Energy is an issue that he's addressing. So I think over a period of time, he's got down to the fundamentals of governance.
So you think he's transformational, he's a doer.
Exactly.
And therefore that's where his support in your sense comes from.
Yes.
And therefore those who now will identify him with the baggage of the past and will raise questions on social cohesion, those are not top of the mind.
No, I will still say that's very important. I'm not saying that there are a couple of, apart from social cohesion, I don't think he has focused enough on two major areas, that is education and health. On both these areas, I'm surprised that someone who's so savvy on the key issues, he has not spent enough on education. Have you seen major education reforms? The new education policy is still pending. And take a look at health. He's actually spending less on health. I mean, these are, I think, two fundamental areas where the Prime Minister should be concentrating on in the next 2 years of his government.
And what about social tensions?
Yes.
If I may, on the specific question that you asked about packaging, I would word it differently, the communication.
Yeah.
There is better communication. People feel that they agree with what the Prime Minister is saying. The simple example which a Congress leader gave, he said at any other time, given the number of deaths of our soldiers that are being reported in conflict, either at the border or because of terrorism, any government would have been in a state of crisis. But here, when there are soldiers who are killed by terrorists or at the border, when their bodies come back home, there is still a sense of, here is a Prime Minister who will act against those who are responsible for the death. And if I may use the word of that Congress leader, he said, the feeling is that ठीक है मेरा भाई मर गया पर इसका बदला जरूर लिया जाएगा.
The flip side, and I want to end it here, is that there will be those who will say, his critics have said from time to time, that he's a very good event manager, that he choreographs situations very well. Is it about choreography or is it about reality? The effort that he's actually putting in, no one doubts the effort, but there are critics who will keep saying it's too much of event management.
If you see what China did in the 70s and the 80s, they laid out a plan, they had a vision. They mobilized the country, won people's buy-in, and they moved very quickly in that direction, which has changed the face of China in 3 decades. While, of course, the UPA government was also, you can't take away the fact that they were being earnest to trying to do whatever they could given the circumstances with whatever corruption was thrown in. Here's a Prime Minister who has a vision for a new India, and he's working at full steam to try and achieve that vision.
There will be those who will say that we are seeing Mr. Modi, when we keep raising issues which are contentious, through perhaps the old prism, like cow vigilance. What more can he do? What more can he do to rein in the cow vigilantes? Can he do more in your view?
Certainly. Cow vigilante is not old issue. I'm not seeing him through the prism of Gujarat. I'm seeing him through the prism of what is happening. This is the all-powerful Prime Minister, this larger-than-life Prime Minister, and these are governments run by his party in Uttar Pradesh. Just the other day, Jewar has happened, Saharanpur has happened.
Isn't he capturing, that is also true, but isn't he capturing what they call the zeitgeist of the young? He has captured young aspirational India. We are a young country and Mr. Modi talks directly to that young India and has been able to capture the young, the spirit of the young.
No, apart from that, the spirit of the country. I mean, I have no issues of him showcasing what he's doing. These would be very boring subjects otherwise. Can you imagine urban India reacting to toilets being built? I mean, no one's going to be sitting up, but when you couch it in Swachch Bharat, you make this, that's great. But where, two issues, I think. One is on implementation and a report card to the country. I think this is a great democracy. They could be seduced into believing a few things, but at the end of the time, when election comes, they will say, show us the results.
That's exact. Let me therefore then come to area number two, which many believe is critical for any government, the state of the economy. Take a look at where the Prime Minister stands on the state of the economy.
The man who deserves the nation's resources first.
Most important economic policy for our government is how we can create more employment potential.
This government had the audacity and the ability to take firm decisions, to allow the reality to come out in the fore.
2018 अक्टूबर की डेडलाइन मीट करनी ही है उत्तर प्रदेश को, उत्तराखंड को, बंगाल को, बिहार को, झारखंड को और हमको.
We have converted 111 rivers into waterways.
We are not politically wise, but I think what we have done is in national interest, and therefore I am not at all apologetic about that also.
योगी जी तो गंगा की समस्या को बहुत अच्छी तरह से समझते हैं और वो रात दिन काम कर रहे हैं.
Without creating employment potential, we cannot eradicate the poverty.
8.4% we left the economy, inflation at 4.2%, current account surplus for 3 years, and fiscal deficit at a very nominal 3.5%.
Okay, let's look at the Prime Minister's report card then on the state of the economy. Strengths: low inflation, fiscal deficit under check, the goods and services tax is almost through, and there's been a strong infrastructure push, particularly in key areas like roads and power. The weaknesses: private investment decline, the key factor, a lack of visible job creation, disinvestment targets not met, and limited agrarian reforms. As you can see, I've not mentioned demonetization anywhere because I believe the jury is still out. Rajiv Dubey, if you were to look at the Prime Minister from the state of the economy, do you believe we are better off today than we were 3 years ago?
We are doing just about okay. And under the current circumstances, if you look at the way the global economy is, I think 7% growth, even if it's 5.5%, is just about okay. I would say 2 or 3, thumbs up again, if I may say. Legislative changes that he's brought about, I think, have been excellent. Whether it is GST, RERA, or the Insolvency Act, they are all in the right direction. The effort at power and renewables to reduce the dependence on fossil fuels and the FDI that I mentioned are all good moves. Social sector reforms, Jan Dhan, economic social sector reforms, Jan Dhan, Ujjwala and other schemes. But I think the thumbs down are of course jobs, and jobs are not being created at the pace at which they are supposed to be created. Another big thumbs down has been Startup India, which is really just not taken off, and that's largely to do with the way the government conducts itself. Everything else, whether it's Make in India, whether it is labor reforms, infrastructure, railways, is all a work in progress in the right direction in my view.
But can we really blame the Prime Minister though when it comes to job creation? Unemployment rate 2015-16 5%. Earlier it was 4.9, so it's actually marginally gone up. Total number of jobs created previous 3 years, 2.47 million, but a 39% decline until October 2016, 1.51 million created.
On jobs, can I come in again?
Yes.
Jobs, the problem is that we are not capturing the right kind of jobs. I cannot believe that 12 million graduates are coming out of our colleges every year, and only 1.5 lakh jobs are being created according to Labour Bureau. If that was so, there would be riots on the streets.
But the government says a lot of jobs are being created in the informal sector. There is a lot of startups which are being set up, Mudra Bank loans which are being set out.
E-commerce.
So where is the truth?
E-commerce, logistics are areas that are not even covered by Labour Bureau statistics. I'll just give you one example.
Are we being unfair to the government on
I think a lot more jobs are being created than are being captured. And I'll give you just one example. This is 2 departments of the government. Labour Bureau says we created 1.5 lakh jobs, 1.34 lakh jobs last year. Just the Ministry of Skill Development says they placed 6.5 lakh people last year. And this is just within 2 government departments. So there is obviously a whole lot of jobs that are being created in lakhs, maybe not 12 million a year, but a lot of it is self-employment and a lot of it is not being captured.
So has the Prime Minister only given a handle to his critics when he announced, I'm going to create 5 crore jobs in 5 years in the campaign? Now people are saying, where are those 5 crore jobs? When is that being a little unfair, harsh to him? And is that perhaps his Achilles heel? That people will raise this question from time to time.
Rajdeep, no doubt he has to be answerable to that. Because make or break, if he doesn't do this, what he has promised on the job front, 2019 can begin to look a little distant. But let's come to some of the things. I think he's understood that problem. And therefore, if you look at the current budget, particularly the one that was just delivered, he's focused on 3 or 4 areas that should actually begin to revive the economy, particularly jobs.
Prime Minister committed himself to make in India, but a lot of people within Indian industry are not making in India. They will attend the Prime Minister's conclave, will cheer Make in India, and yet go and invest outside India. Where is the problem? Private investment is still not coming in. Manufacturing is still not growing at the rate the Prime Minister would have hoped.
Well, Rajdeep, on that point, in fact, Make in India policy has just been announced by the government, in which they've said that local suppliers will be given a benefit if they want to invest in the country. 25% is what of the GDP they're targeting for the coming at least next 5 years. But will that happen or not is also because of the global scenarios that we're seeing at the moment. Now, even if the foreign investment that is coming in to set up a manufacturing base here, to cut through the red tapeism here, it's not easy in 3 years to deliver.
So the red tapeism still exists.
It has delivered.
Is it easier to do business in India today than it was 3 years ago?
It is easier because you're striking the right notes. The Prime Minister has taken 50 plus foreign trips, and each trip there's an announcement of how much investment is within 3 years. Within the 3 years.
Where he has to work with states. Let's be honest, a lot of this has to be to work with states. You can't expect the Prime Minister to do everything in Delhi. Has the Niti Aayog, for example, done enough to justify its existence? To justify the end of the Planning Commission, Raj?
We met Mr. Panagadia. I think even he believes that Niti Aayog by itself is a work in progress. Even he believes that it's going to take...
It's a work in progress.
It's a work in progress.
Yes, Rahul.
No, the point I'm making is that the issue of corruption has to be looked at in 2 ways. One is high-level corruption, where, for example, a lot of the scams that happened under the UPA were happening because of discretionary quotas. Stories coming in that Congress people sending parchas, orders going for who those coal blocks should be allocated to. Now you've got virtually all natural resources being allocated through transparent auctions. That takes away a lot of the possibility of corruption. Virtually everything is being put on an e-marketplace for government. However, on the issue of ease of doing business, you speak to industrialists, wherever you meet them, they'll say not much has changed. And the reason for that is it's the Babu on the ground, it's the inspector. His attitude hasn't changed even after demonetization, which was supposed to kill corruption.
Since, demonetization almost is the elephant in the room. This was his biggest step that he's taken certainly in the last 12 months. It seems to have politically worked for him. People believe that he's taken a strong stand against the rich, against those with black money. But has it really, in a sense, transformed the economy? Are we really moving towards the kind of digital economy?
So Rajdeep, we've just put out a very detailed story on an internal report prepared by the Modi government, which details the advantages thanks to demonetization. And they're saying the economy has saved about, there's an advantage to the economy of about 5 lakh crore rupees. And the explanation really is that if currency were being printed at the same speed at which it was being printed prior to demonetization, the economy would have had about 19.25 lakh crore rupees. Right now, the economy in a fully functional state is functioning at about 14.2 lakh crore rupees, which is about a 5 lakh crore rupee saving. So essentially, a lot of the cash which was stashed away, stored, not producing any real economic growth or value to the economy, that's now not being used. In that sense, they believe that's an advantage. Also look at a lot of the data points this report has about the movement to digital. I think very quickly and very smartly, they've now shifted the narrative to the issue of digital transactions.
Could we say that he's understood the big picture? Again with GST, again with the push on infrastructure, the big picture, particularly focusing on key areas like power, roads, where his ministers by all accounts have done very well. Yeah. He's managed to understand what it will take to push the economy ahead. So he has got that, and if he gets the benefit in the next 2 years of many of those projects really taking off, then he's in pretty smooth terrain towards 2019. Would I be right in saying that?
Rajdeep, can I just come in at this?
I think one of the reasons why the government is pushing July 1 GST is one of those reasons, that, and they want to make sure that it's non-inflationary, that it doesn't impact the image of the government or the poll prospects of the government 2 years down the line.
So he hopes to be in a sweet spot. Yes.
Your point on big picture is very important. Because if you take a look at the approach towards corruption, and there has been a lot of downsides about demonetization, of course we accept that. There's been a depression in terms of the GDP. Yes, there was. But I think corruption, particularly for the middle class, had begun to hurt. We live our lives honestly, as do much of the poor, I mean most of the poor. If, for instance, he's addressing one of the fundamentals in their mind and their logic, that if you don't break this cancer of corruption, you're not going to get to the GDP growth that the country is capable of. So I think he's addressed it. You could call it packaging, you could call it, but I think that's a fundamental problem this country faced. He's taken it head on. And let us look at some of the things. I think Rahul pointed it out. There is a digital trail now in whatever you do, large sums of money. That's what we're worried about. Yes, petty corruption continues. But even those guys who are trying to do that, there the difference is not in terms of cutting black money. There is in terms of delivery. And that's a state issue. You make things easier, you do e-governance, all that discretionary stuff that Rahul was talking about gets cut. You can address both the large corruption and the small corruption. I think that's what the beginnings.
But I think what is clear is economy, in a sense, will be the big test for Mr. Modi in the next 2 years, building up to 2019. We're now looking at internal security, defense, and foreign affairs. Take a look.
कड़ाई से काम
We would be able to redeem it.
पैनी निगाह रखे हुए
Back to normal.
कश्मीर पर भारतीय जनता पार्टी की सरकार पैनी निगाह रखे हुए कश्मीर को आप बीच में से एक 6 महीना उठाकर देख नहीं सकते.
Series of doings and misdoings have happened over the years. But I'm sure we would be able to redeem it.
हमारी जिम्मेदारी है कश्मीर की स्थिति को काबू करना. इस पर भागने की कोई बात ही नहीं, भागना चाहते भी नहीं, भागना चाहिए भी.
There would be no relaxation, no efforts spared.
पूरा देश जानता है कि कश्मीर के लिए आजादी के वक्त जो गलत फैसले लिए गए, इसके कारण आज कश्मीर समस्या पैदा हुई है.
We have exhausted means of civility, and now we are going in for hard options.
भारतीय जनता पार्टी की सरकार ने, नरेंद्र मोदी सरकार ने नक्सलवाद को खत्म करने के लिए बहुत कड़ाई से काम किया.
This, as I said, is a cumulative effect of what has happened in the last 25-27 years when we were not around.
पाकिस्तान और भारत के रिश्ते अच्छे करने के लिए नरेंद्र मोदी सरकार ने जितना किया इतना किसी ने नहीं किया.
Again, things will be back to normal and Kashmir will not burn.
चित्त मात्र भी चिंता करने की जरूरत नहीं है. नरेंद्र मोदी सरकार कश्मीर की स्थिति को काबू में लेगी और बहुत जल्द.
Okay, internal security and defense report card, strengths, hurdles in defense procurement removed, OROP in place, ISIS recruitment blunted. Weaknesses, Kashmir remains on the boil, increase in terrorism incidents and loss of Jawans. Naxal situation remains tense and has been aggravated in recent weeks. Foreign policy, strengths, the Prime Minister successfully selling brand India, has worked effectively with NRIs, isolated Pakistan in SARC. Foreign policy weaknesses, unable to control China's expansionism. Pakistan policy remains ambivalent, still to come to terms with the Trump regime in the United States. Let's take a look. Where do you rate the Prime Minister? Thumbs up or thumbs down when it comes to security and foreign policy?
I'd say mixed results.
Mixed results, which is troubling because there is the fear that a year ago, the Prime Minister, particularly on foreign policy, was seen to be making all the right steps. In the last year, particularly Chinese expansionism, the situation in Kashmir and the ambivalence towards Pakistan has cast some kind of a shadow over the Prime Minister's foreign policy footsteps. Has he got his strategy right or not?
When I say mixed results, you could look at it from the home front as well, because you mentioned security.
Yes.
And we're seeing Kashmir. Clearly, there's a policy that needs to be revamped completely. You cannot have a situation where Kashmir is rolling back to a situation that, we saw in the 90s.
Is that his biggest weakness at the moment? If you were to assess, particularly between year 2 and 3, what's happened in Kashmir is the most troubling aspect at the moment of the security situation, one which it doesn't seem clear what the strategy is.
Every man who becomes Prime Minister of India seems to believe that he will go down in history as the man who brings peace to the Indian subcontinent. For many months, Prime Minister Narendra Modi was afflicted by the same malaise. He seems to have this sense of idealism that if I spend time with the Chinese President or if I meet the Pakistani Prime Minister, I'll be able to win them over, somehow charm them. That's not the way foreign policy works. So while he was very ambitious, very hungry, very enthusiastic in his international trips, this false sense of this false sense that the Prime Minister had that a personal intervention from him, an outreach on his part, would change the Pakistan mindset towards India, or would change the countries like China make their foreign policy and they stick to it over decades.
Particularly China, which is the worry. You mentioned one border, one road. There are those who believe that India has been on the wrong side of this. We have got ourselves isolated on this issue. Do you believe that the Prime Minister has somewhere misread the mood in Beijing and perhaps been over-enthusiastic initially and now is forced to pull back, send the Dalai Lama to Arunachal almost as a message to China that we are not as sure-footed as we want to be on China and Pakistan?
Both Belt and Road as well as the energy issue, if you look at it, both places we've not been able to counter China in the way that we should have or we could have tried to do. And Belt and Road has been known for at least since 2013 that that they are going to do this, and there's a big aspect to Belt and Road which is going to go around the ocean, and they are building 3 aircraft carriers just to control and to secure the Belt and Road initiative.
But is the muscular diplomacy working? Is the muscular diplomacy working with our neighbors or not? We've isolated Pakistan in SAARC, so that's an achievement the Prime Minister could well claim credit for. He's reached out to the Middle East in perhaps a manner that many did not expect and has been rather successful. Has the muscular diplomacy worked? Has he sold brand India effectively or not?
He sold brand India effectively abroad, but not in our neighborhood. If you notice this meeting that was organized by the Chinese, all the SAARC countries except India attended it. Well thought out policies. There's no substitute for well thought out policies.
But in his first year,
unilateral gestures and flamboyance is not a substitute. I don't know if there is a Pakistan policy. One day it's Papi Jappi, the next day it's shelling.
But let's look at Kashmir. Let's look at Kashmir. In year 1, he took a major step by getting the BJP to tie up with the PDP. Now we are in year 3. At the end of year 3, we are not sure where
charter of governance.
We are not sure where that government is headed. And we've got a second year, possibly, of more trouble in Kashmir. Is the answer only putting in more security forces, losing more Jawans? Is that going to increase in terrorism incidents? Should that trouble the Prime Minister, or is this part of his nationalist rhetoric? I'm going to take a strong nationalistic stand towards Kashmir.
In Kashmir, there are 3 major things that you would have to do. Clearly, law and order. You have to keep it if you have to do it. They have not delivered on that. Second is development. If you do not deliver what the central government or the state government had promised, and they haven't done this in 2 years, there's really been no progress, you're bound to fail because people will get disillusioned. And the third part, which is very important, is the dialogue process. You have to engage the people. If you engage on these 3 things, that's when you begin to win Kashmir again. That is where I think the government's problem
lies. No, but is it about hearts and minds, or is it about land? Is it here where the BJP is going back to its old way of looking at Kashmir? It's our land. Rather than seeing there are hearts and minds and Kashmiris, is there that trust deficit, particularly, and I come back to social cohesion, large Kashmiri Muslim population, the BJP is uncomfortable in dealing with Kashmiris?
It is about hearts and minds because again and again there's always been a iron fist and a velvet glove approach, where again the Prime Minister goes and he speaks about how it's only 4% of the population which is indulging, or there are only certain districts which are afflicted with this trouble. A large part of the state is still pro-India, if I may use that word, and there are more development initiatives which are being taken. When he was speaking also in the state, he said that we want to bring progress, and people who are throwing stones, here is a perfect example. When he was inaugurating Dhan, he said a perfect example of how people are using those stones as building blocks for the state, and that's the message he's sending across. But if I may ask everyone at the table, is there a sense that political compulsions have hamstrung the Prime Minister in taking a strong stand vis-a-vis the security situation in Kashmir?
The flip side of that also in a way is that he's got the same individual as the Defence and Finance Minister of the country, and many will say that reveals to some extent that the limitations of talent at the very top, or the excessive dependence on the PMO to resolve all issues. Is that, I'm just wondering whether the government on foreign policy and defence has perhaps just on the economy that it's getting the big picture right.
I don't think
has it got the big picture right on defence and foreign policy?
On foreign policy, he's got the big, despite what Javed Bhai said, there has been a certain clarity. After all, there are three
Pakistan.
things. No, on foreign policy.
Have you got it right on America? No, are we right on America?
Let me finish.
Are we right on America? Are we right on Pakistan? Are we right on China?
I wouldn't take it. I'd take the broad buckets of issues. Take trade. He's done very well on trade as he went around, engaging Americas, engaging Africa, engaging Europe. You've got the highest amount of FDI come in recent years. Then let's look at energy. Despite the NSG setback, the fact is he's moved a lot on the Indo-US nuclear deal, though it's a legacy issue, and been able to convince Japan, Canada, Australia to supply uranium, which is what we want. The real rub has been security, terror, which is our other major concern. In that, I think what you mentioned earlier, by engaging, for instance, the Central Asian, the Middle East countries, he's trying to build a ring of Islamic countries around that could put pressure on Pakistan. Look, no one, let me say what Padmaja had talked about in terms of Kashmir. Obviously, this is not just an internal matter. You have to deal with a complex international situation, a very hostile neighbor who's unstable. Whatever efforts you make with Pakistan, and I think he did very well. You might say, yeah, everyone's Prime Minister's dream is to sort of bring peace, but if you look at what is there, can he do business currently with Pakistan, either the generals or the civilian leadership? A lot depends on the other hand as well.
Has the surgical strike that was done in year 3 in a sense drawn some kind of a red line? There's a red line now that the Prime Minister will take so much and no further, and could that escalate? Could what is seen as muscular approach lead to what others would call a misadventurism? Is that possible?
No, but why should India not impose consequences on Pakistan? I think one of the biggest failures of the UPS foreign policy was when 26/11 happened, we did nothing about it. There must be consequences. At least now Pakistan knows if they come and cause a major terror attack in India, India will hit back, and each
that has
time,
not stopped the terror attacks.
Nothing ever will. Nothing ever will. It's not as if Pakistan will ever sit back and allow for India to dominate. You hit them, they hit you, but it already was like that. Pakistan was hitting you, bleeding you constantly. You were doing nothing about it. This way, with the video that's been put out this week, that's a spectacular artillery fire. Artillery guns taken up on helicopters, lined up in pistol position, hammering away at Pakistani posts. It's good for the morale of people across the country. They feel, okay, you're doing something, otherwise you're constantly getting a pounding and
30 seconds. 30 seconds.
Is it your case that this is the only time it has happened? And is it your case that it never happened before?
No, absolutely not.
Yes,
but there's a big difference.
The only difference is that they're showing it on television and we are lapping it up, and the previous government by choice did not.
Okay, let me take one final break at that point. When we return, each of my panelists will get 30 seconds for that big question: what's the biggest asset of this government and what's been its biggest weakness so far? One last time to the Prime Minister's report card. 3 years into the Modi government, what are his strengths and weaknesses? I'm going to give my panelists 30 seconds each to tell us what they think are the Prime Minister's strength and his weakness, that of his government. Start with you, Padma.
Strength, very good social messaging in terms of every scheme has been given a face. They've personalized the message. When he talks about even Swachch Bharat, he says that there are young girls who have to go out and defecate in the open. The kind of impact it has on their lives. Even when he's talking about giving LPG cylinders to women so that they don't have to cook over firewood.
Weakness?
Very quickly, the other good message that he gave in his very first speech when he spoke about how the boys should be asked by parents, where they were at night. Why is it only asked to the girls? Weakness is the question which I had asked earlier. The coalition with the PDP, is it in any way impacting the way that we would react in Kashmir?
Okay, so you believe Kashmir remains a weakness for this government, Devina?
The coalition, not Kashmir per se, but the
coalition. Yes.
All right, for me, the strength for the government will be that they're thinking, they're moving in the right direction, especially in economy front, demonetization being a great risk, but he has the audacity to do it, which the previous government didn't. GST again would be strength. The weakness would be letting the big fish off. For example, we yet to see whether Vijay Mallya would be brought back, economic offenders bill in the making, whether they'll be able to catch those and send a big message that you will not be allowed to play with our public sector banks, with the exchequer's money, you'll be punished.
Yes.
Strengths for me, the ability to push through the legislative reforms and thinking on their feet, things that they are doing in things like defense manufacturing policy, changing policy on the go. I think that gives you an impression of a government that's thinking on its feet. And I think the big no-no for me has been I think social sector reforms, labor reforms, some of those things.
So education, health, social sector, perhaps much more needed to be done.
What needs to be done is almost scary.
It's almost scary. Javed Ansari, strength and weakness.
Big decisions, not afraid to take tough decisions, scam-free government, but he's not done enough to rein in this muscular majoritarianism in his
So
party.
you believe that he has still not done enough to reach out to the minorities in particular? He's not given them a sense
He's
of...
not done enough to rein in some of the eager beavers in his party.
Not done enough to rein in eager beavers, or shall we call them the more fanatical elements in his party? Raj, strength and weaknesses.
I think new narratives, you know, his ability to think out of the box, strong, decisive leadership. Weaknesses. I would say that he lacks a bench strength. The government lacks a bench strength. There are no great champions. He has got a few talented ministers, but doesn't have enough to get all the big ideas, to implement all his big ideas. And finally, I believe social cohesion, he needs to work a lot on that.
Social cohesion being a weakness, yes. Rahul, strength and weakness.
Rajdeep, strength is his total commitment to the idea of long-term nation building, a vision for what India in the future should look like, the ability to work 24/7 and the motivation to do what it takes to get there. The weakness is he's trying to do too many things at the same time. Multiple schemes launched simultaneously. The Indian Sarkari machinery simply cannot keep up with Modi. So his idealism to get things done sometimes runs way ahead of the ability of the Indian system to drive that change.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there. I've already listed out various strengths and weaknesses. If I do any more, I'll get myself into even more trouble than normally I am. It's a report card. At the end of the day, we leave you, the viewer, to judge whether Mr. Modi gets pass marks or whether he's average, whether he deserves a distinction or a failure. Clearly, Prime Minister Modi, 3 years into his term, popularity is still very high as per the polls. But remember, 2 years is a long time in politics. 2019 will be the year when he'll have the real report card. This has been only a trailer. Thanks for watching. Goodbye. Thank you.